She cooked to disappear. He ate to forget. But the bruises told another story. At first, they were just shadows, faint, fleeting hints beneath her sleeves as she moved about the kitchen. Emery Hagan might have ignored them, like he'd ignored so much in his life. But that evening, with the sun bleeding orange through the cottonwoods and the skillet hissing like a coiled snake, something shifted. Ruth turned from the stove just as her cuff slipped, and he saw it. A dark bloom of purple, raw and spreading along her forearm, like something festering beneath the skin. She caught him looking, and in one fluid motion, tugged her sleeve back in place. No flinch, no shame, just a question, as if nothing had happened. Want seconds? Emery stared down at the plate. Your biscuits are burning, he muttered, though they weren't. He just needed her to look away, and she did. Outside, the ranch stirred softly, wind rustling through leaves, a mule braying in the far paddock, the low lull of cattle settling in for night. But Emery's mind refused to settle. Not this time. Ruth had come to the ranch 6 months back, needing work and shelter. She'd said she was a widow. He hadn't asked for more, didn't want more. She kept her head down, worked hard, and asked for little beyond her corner room tucked behind the pantry. Quiet was something Emery understood. It was what had been left to him after grief hollowed him out like a drought does to a riverbed. Still, that night, the silence between them felt different, heavier, dangerous, like something unspoken had finally dared to step into the light. As Ruth poured him coffee, he noticed another flicker, barely a wince, as her wrist grazed the rim of his mug. Another bruise, fainter but fresh. His throat tightened. She turned to leave. Who did that? His voice cut through the room like a lasso snapping tight. Ruth froze mid-step, didn't speak, didn't turn, just stopped. I ain't stupid, Emery said softer now, and you ain't clumsy. So who hurt you? Silence spilled into the room like water from a cracked barrel. When she finally turned around, her face was unreadable. Not afraid, not proud, just tired. Don't matter, she said, voice low. It's done. Emery scraped his chair back, the wood rasping loud on the plank floor. You don't believe that? She looked past him toward the fire, as if it held the answer she didn't want to speak. You got family? He asked suddenly. Ruth blinked. No one that counts. Then you're alone. Her jaw clenched. Been alone most my life. He stepped forward, not to threaten, not to comfort, just close enough she had to meet his gaze. You ain't alone here. Not unless you want to be. For the first time, something cracked. Just slightly. Her lip trembled, barely, but she caught it before it could fall apart. He didn't press her, not then. Just nodded once and left her standing in the firelight. The next morning, Emery found her on her knees, scrubbing the kitchen floor, sleeves rolled up again. He crouched beside her. Someone's been coming here, he said. Ruth stilled, didn't answer. I saw the tracks. She froze, sponge still in hand, water dripping from her knuckles. He won't stop, she whispered. He never does, no matter how far I run. A coldness settled in Emery's chest. Who? Her voice was nearly gone. His name's Luther Kane. The name meant nothing to him, but her face, it told him everything. If you've ever been silenced, stay with this story. That evening, he watched her from the porch as she hung laundry near the barn. Her sleeves were pulled down despite the heat, her movements careful. One of the pins slipped from her fingers. She bent to retrieve it, then froze, eyes darting to the tree line, like she'd heard something he hadn't. He was on his feet before she stood. I'm going to town, he said. No. She turned, voice sharper than he'd ever heard it. Don't go to the sheriff. I told you he won't help. None of them will. Luther owns half this county, deputies, judges, even the preacher. He donates to the church, gives the orphans toys. You go in with a story about me and some bruises, they'll laugh you out the door. I ain't going to the sheriff. Then where? He didn't answer. Later that night, long after the lamps had gone out, a knock came at the side gate. Emery wasn't the one who opened it. Emmy did, his youngest ranch hand, barely 17, still green behind the ears. Miss Ruth, the boy stammered, there's a man asking for you, at the gate. Her stomach twisted. What kind of man? The kind that don't blink much. She ran, nearly knocking over jars on the way out. But when she saw him waiting, shotgun in hand, her breath caught. It's me, Emery said, steady as stone. She lowered the barrel, chest heaving. You came back. He nodded once. Course I did. He handed her a folded note. Did you find the man? She asked. I did. He's willing. Just needs a name, a face, and a reason. Emery looked her dead in the eye. He'll have all three by morning. To be continued. Morning broke over the ridge like a brand across the sky, hot, red, and sharp. Ruth stood in the kitchen doorway, still clutching the note Emery had given her the night before. The words on it weren't threats. They were worse. They were familiar. Handwriting she'd seen before on envelopes slipped under doors, scrawled across old letters she'd burned more than once. A name signed in ash, not ink. Luther Kane. She folded the note and tucked it deep into the pocket of her skirt, as if burying it would silence the dread curling in her gut. Out on the porch, Emery sat with his coffee untouched, his eyes fixed on the horizon. He hadn't spoken much since returning from town. She knew what silence meant in a man like him. It wasn't uncertainty, it was calculation. You see him again? He asked without turning. No, she answered. But he left that? She nodded toward the note. I already made the call, Emery said. The man I met, he don't wear a badge, but he's the kind of law that don't wait on permission. That afternoon, Ruth hung linens with trembling hands. Every flapping sheet felt like a curtain hiding something just beyond sight. The wind came in strange gusts. The horses were restless. Even the dog barked without cause. Then Emmy appeared on the porch again, hat twisting in nervous fingers. Miss Ruth, he said, voice brittle. That man, he's back. Her heart dropped. He's at the fence, Emmy added. Same hat, same smile. Said he's got a message. Emery stepped onto the porch, jaw tight, but before he could move, Ruth was already pushing past him, shotgun in hand. She didn't care who saw. She found him standing by the fence like he owned the place. Black hat low, silver belt buckle, catching the light. He tipped his hat when he saw her. Afternoon, darlin'. Didn't expect the welcome committee. You're not welcome, she snapped. He grinned. Now that's not true. You're the one that left me, remember? I just came to talk. You don't talk, she said. You break. Before he could reply, Emery stepped up behind her, eyes like stone. You heard her. Luther's gaze flicked between them. Didn't take long to find a new protector. You think I need protectin'. You ain't learned nothin', Ruth said. Luther's face darkened just slightly. You think that dog's gonna save you? That ranch hand? The girl? Leave her out of this, Emery warned. Luther smiled again, wider this time. She's mine. No, Ruth said, voice steady, rising with something fierce. She's not yours. Not ever. From the shadows behind the porch, a third figure stepped forward, broad-shouldered, hat tilted low over a missing eye. The one-eyed ranger didn't speak, but his presence alone shifted the air like a coming storm. Luther froze mid-smirk. The ranger's voice came low and dry. You're trespassing. Luther held up both hands. All right, I'll leave, for now. But don't mistake mercy for weakness. You should go, the ranger replied, before I mistake your breath for permission. Luther turned and mounted his horse with slow, practiced ease. This ain't over. Not for you, Emery said, but it might be for her. That night, Ruth sat beside the fire, her fingers tracing the edges of a small locket she hadn't opened in years. Inside was a face she barely remembered, and a name she didn't say aloud anymore. I used to believe he loved me, she said. Emery stirred the fire. That's how they keep you. Not with fists, with hope. She nodded. The first time he struck me, it was like being dropped through ice. One moment I was warm and safe, and the next, gone. But I stayed. You always stay the first time? She glanced toward the loft where the child slept. He didn't leave Bruises at first, Ruth continued. Said he was smarter than that, but smart didn't mean kind, and pain always finds a way. The fire cracked. Outside, coyotes cried somewhere beyond the fields. Emery didn't move. He just let her speak. like a man who understood the weight of things unsaid. "He won't stop," Ruth whispered. "Not until he's taken everything." Emery looked up. "Then we don't wait. We take it back." She blinked at him. "You really think someone like me deserves that?" "I think someone like you deserves peace." That night Ruth didn't sleep. She sat in the rocking chair by the hearth, watching embers flicker low. And in the dark she made a decision, not to run, not again. When morning came, she packed a small bag, 2 dresses, her Bible, and the locket. Outside, Emery met the ranger at the edge of the property, where the mist still clung to the grass like memory. No words passed between them, just a nod, a vow exchanged in silence. Ruth stepped onto the porch, her coat drawn tight. "You sure about this?" she asked. The ranger tilted his head. "You want to run?" "No," she said, steady as iron. "I want to fight." By midday, the ranch had gone too quiet. Ruth stood near the barn, eyeing the horizon, the clothesline forgotten. The men weren't where they were supposed to be. Emmy and the other ranch hands had ridden out early with tools and packs, claiming fence repairs. But something in their eyes, something unsaid, made her chest tighten. She found Emery near the stables, tightening the saddle on his mare. "You sent them," she said. He didn't deny it. "You think I can't fight?" "I think you fought long enough alone," he replied. She shook her head. "You should have told me." "I was going to," he said quietly, "but I needed time to be sure." The wind shifted, and for a moment, everything stilled. Emery pulled a folded paper from his pocket. The ranger wired back, "Said to tell you to pack a bag." She didn't ask why. She already knew. Inside, she chose only what mattered: the locket, a fresh shirt for Delilah, and the ribbon the child had worn the day she arrived, faded blue embroidered with a name they didn't yet know. They left before sundown. By the time dawn stretched fire across the hills, Ruth stood beside Emery on the edge of a strange ranch a county over, watching the ranger speak with a man she didn't recognize. But the way they moved, measured, careful, told her this wasn't a rescue. It was a reckoning. That evening, by firelight, Ruth sat across from the ranger. His hands were steady, sharpening a blade with the quiet patience of a man used to waiting. "You ever been married?" she asked. He didn't answer at first. "Once," he said, briefly. "What happened?" He kept working the blade. "She made me choose, her or the job. I chose wrong." Ruth looked at the fire, the sparks rising like ghosts. "Do you regret it?" He didn't hesitate. "Every day." Behind them, Delilah slept wrapped in quilts, her breath shallow, her body curled like a question unanswered. "She reminds me of me," Ruth said. "The way she jumps at shadows, the way she waits for the worst." Emery spoke softly. "You know her story?" Ruth shook her head. "Not all of it, but I know enough." They were camped outside the old Black Hollow Ranch, once abandoned, now reclaimed by a name whispered through the county like a curse. Luther Kane, a place where things had gone missing, and no one had looked too hard. "She's in there," the ranger said. They didn't need to ask who. "She's chained?" The ranger nodded. "But not loud, not in sight, in shame. That's how he keeps them." Ruth stood. "Then let's break it." The barn door creaked as they opened it. The girl inside flinched, covering her face with both arms. Emery knelt low, keeping his voice soft. "It's all right," he said. She didn't believe him, not until Ruth stepped forward, knelt beside her, and reached for the chain. "I know what that feels like," Ruth whispered. The girl looked up, eyes far too old for her years. Then slowly she nodded. Outside, the ranger stepped from the tree line, rifle aimed and ready. "Next shot's not a warning," he said. Luther staggered from the shadows, blood streaking from his shoulder. "You'll hang for this," he hissed. "I've got friends." "Not anymore," the ranger said. "They read what I sent. The judge, the sheriff, the preacher. They know about the girls you bought, the land you stole." Luther's smirk cracked. "You're a ghost now," the ranger said coldly, "and a man with no friends is already dead." The silence that followed wasn't victory, it was relief. Ruth crouched beside the girl, touched her cheek with trembling fingers. "Thank you," the child whispered. The ranger didn't smile, but his nod carried the weight of something permanent. He rode off without ceremony, vanishing into the morning mist like the memory of a nightmare that dared not return. That night back at Emery's ranch, the girls slept between them on a bed of patchwork quilts. Ruth stroked her hair, listening to the wind. "She told me her name," Ruth said. Emery looked up. "What is it?" "Delilah. That's a strong name." "So was mine," Ruth whispered, "but I forgot it for a while." In the distance, the church bell rang out its morning hymn. For the first time in years, Ruth didn't flinch at the sound. The morning after the rescue, Ruth woke with Delilah's small hand curled against her chest. Outside, the frost lay thick over the fence rails and brittle grass, and the sky turned pale gold with the promise of winter. Emery had already gone out to tend the animals, the rhythm of ranch life continuing as if the world hadn't tilted. But something had shifted, not just in the air, but in her, in all of them. Later that day, they went to church. Ruth dressed Delilah in the soft blue wool she'd mended weeks before, and Emery brought out the old Sunday coat he hadn't worn in years. As they stepped inside, heads turned. Whispers followed, but no one dared speak aloud the thing everyone now knew. They took their seats on the back bench. Emery held his hat in both hands, fingers curled tight around the brim. Ruth sat tall, chin high. Delilah leaned into her side, eyes wide but unafraid. When the final hymn faded and the congregation began to drift toward the door, the preacher descended the steps. He paused in front of them, boots slow on the planks. His eyes met Ruth's, then narrowed. "I buried you," he said, voice low and worn with years. Ruth's gaze didn't flinch. "No, sir," she said. "You just buried the part of me he tried to kill." The preacher blinked, then nodded and walked on. Back at the ranch, Emery replaced broken boards and repaired the porch swing that had hung lopsided since last spring. He taught Delilah how to scatter seed without startling the chickens, and how to press her palm flat when feeding the horses so they wouldn't nip. She still startled at sudden movements, still ducked when voices rose too fast, but she giggled more. And when she slept, her arms didn't clutch the blankets like armor. One evening, Ruth asked Emery to sit with her by the fire. They hadn't spoken much since the return. Not really. "She's healing," Ruth said softly, watching Delilah sleep across the room. "But she still doesn't know who she is. Not fully." Emery nodded. "She doesn't remember her full name?" "Not yet." Ruth stared into the flames. "She had one once, a real name, but it's slipping from her. I see it in her eyes." She hesitated, then added, "And she deserves better than what I've got left in me." "She deserves someone who loves her," Emery said simply. "That's all. That's everything." Ruth turned to him, her eyes searching, uncertain. In her glance was a question, quiet but aching. "Not yet," he said, almost a whisper. Snow came early that year. By the end of November, the fields were white and clean, like the land had decided to start over. Ruth took to baking in the mornings, her hands steady again. Delilah followed her everywhere, a shadow wrapped in flannel and wool. One afternoon, a stranger appeared. Emery saw him first, leaning against the post of the front gate, as if he'd been waiting for someone to notice. He wore a dark overcoat and boots too polished for ranch country. "What's your business?" Emery asked, stepping out onto the porch. The man smiled slow. "That depends. Is this where Ruth lives?" Ruth stepped outside, pale but steady. The man's smile widened as he looked past Emery, eyes locking onto hers. "Ah, there she is." The shotgun came up without hesitation. Ruth stood between him and the house, the barrel level with his chest. "She's ours," the man said. "She's mine," Ruth replied, her voice like cold steel. He chuckled. "You think a dog's gonna stop me? That girl don't even have a name on paper." The dog growled low, teeth bared, eyes locked on the stranger. Behind Ruth, Delilah cried out, soft but broken. The man's hand moved just slightly. A shot rang out. The man stumbled back, clutching his shoulder, blood blooming through his coat. Sheriff Tannen stepped from the tree line, gun still raised. "You all right?" he asked. "No," Emery said, "but we will be." The town came together after that. The preacher returned, not with sermons, but with tools and blankets. Neighbors brought food, nails, firewood. For the first time, Ruth didn't feel like a ghost in someone else's town. At Christmas, Emery walked Ruth and Delilah down the church aisle. Not as survivors, as family. Ruth never thought she'd have a daughter. But there was Delilah, her hand in Ruth's, calling her mama like the word had always belonged to them both. Still, not every scar vanished. Sometimes Ruth would pause mid-task, lost in a memory that gripped her lungs tight. Emery would see it, but say nothing. He'd just place a steady hand on her back, a quiet reminder that she didn't have to face the dark alone. One morning she found something strange in the garden, tracks too large for Delilah, too wide for her own. She called Emery out. He saw them too. The dog vanished the fourth night. No sign of struggle, no blood, just an empty bowl and silence too loud. That night the well's pulley creaked. Ruth and Emery crept out together, rifle in hand. Tied to the post beside the well was the dog, alive, muzzled, eyes wild. "Do you want to run?" Emery asked. Ruth shook her head. "No," she said, "I want to fight." The night after the dog was found tied to the well, Ruth couldn't sleep. She sat by the fire, locket in hand, its gold dulled by years of touch. Outside, the wind dragged across the roof like something looking for a way in. Every sound made her flinch. Every silence made her heart pound harder. Upstairs, Delilah cried out. Ruth was at her side in seconds. "Mama!" the girl whimpered, her forehead damp with sweat. "He came to me again. In the dream." Ruth held her close. "Who, sweetheart?" "The man with the belt," she whispered. "The one with white hair. He used to lock me in the dark." She looked up with wide, trembling eyes. "He said he's coming back." Ruth's blood ran cold. By dawn, Emery was already in town, pounding on the sheriff's door. Sheriff Tannen met him with tired eyes and a loaded revolver on the desk. "I heard," he said. "You think it's Kane?" "No, he's gone. This is someone else." The girl remembered a man. White hair, belt, dreams full of darkness. Tannen straightened. "Let me check the stage records." A few minutes later, the sheriff returned holding a worn ledger. Couple days back, one man came in from the west. Didn't stay long. Paid cash. Clean boots. Quiet. "White hair?" Tannen nodded. "Not old enough for it. But yeah, white as snow." "Where'd he go?" "Didn't say. Rode out on horseback. Headed south. Could have circled back." Emery left without another word. That afternoon, he and Ruth boarded every window and bolted every door. Delilah stayed close, clinging to her mother's skirts like they were her last lifeline. But the night came anyway. It always did. And with it, the voice. A laugh first, quiet, slow, sickening. Then words whispered just outside the window. "You've been feeding her lies," the man said. "But she remembers me now, don't you, little bird?" Delilah whimpered and clung tighter. "That's his voice," she whispered. "He's the one who—" She didn't finish. She didn't have to. The dog snarled, pressed against the front door with every hair on its body bristling. Emery cocked the rifle, voice flat and deadly. "I'll count to 3. If I hear one more sound, it's over." 1. A rustle on the porch. 2. The clink of metal, maybe a boot spur, maybe a knife. The man stepped into view. He didn't raise a weapon, didn't shout. He just grinned, calm and quiet, like a man already certain of his power. "You don't know what she is," he said, his voice low. "But I do. I made her. Broke her in like a colt." Emery raised the rifle. "She's got my blood in her," the man continued. "Shoot me and you'll never know the truth. Why she cries when it rains. Why she flinches when someone raises a hand. You don't get to speak her truth," Ruth said, stepping between him and the girl. "She's not yours, not anymore." His smile turned sharp. "But I already left something behind. You think it's over?" Delilah pressed her face into Ruth's coat. "He said he wasn't done." That night, no one slept. They took turns sitting watch, fire crackling low, rifles within reach. But the man didn't return. Not that night, not the next. Still, the fear lingered. Then Delilah woke one morning with a memory. "I remember something else," she whispered. Ruth leaned in, holding her close. "A woman," the girl said. She smelled like violets. She used to sing. She called me May." The name settled over the room like the first snow. Emery's eyes met Ruth's. No one spoke. Days passed. Then a knock came. Quiet, cautious. Ruth opened the door, Emery at her side. A woman stood on the porch, older, thin, with sorrow woven into every wrinkle. In her hand, a folded newspaper clipping. "My name is Clara Ridge," she said. "I've been looking for my niece. She vanished when she was 5. Delilah peeked from behind Ruth, eyes wide. The woman's mouth fell open. She dropped the paper and collapsed to her knees. "May," she whispered. Delilah stepped forward, slowly, carefully. They stared at each other for a long, breathless moment. Then the girl moved, arms outstretched, heart pounding. She didn't know why, only that something in her bones said this was safe, and when Clara embraced her, the past and present stitched themselves together like torn cloth, made whole again. Later, Ruth found Emery standing alone by the porch, the wind tugging at his collar. "I've been thinking," he said, "about what she said." He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a ribbon, faded blue embroidered with tiny letters in worn thread. "Emma," Ruth whispered, "maybe initials, maybe a name, but it's a start." They brought the ribbon inside and Delilah, no, May, held it like a piece of herself returned from the dark. The snow fell heavier that week, blanketing the valley in a hush thick enough to muffle memories. Inside the house, May clutched the blue ribbon like it held every answer she'd been too young to ask. Clara Ridge, her aunt, her last bloodkin, sat by the hearth with eyes full of wonder and years of loss. "I searched for her every day," Clara whispered to Ruth, "but the trail went cold, and the law turned colder." "She was never just missing," Ruth replied gently. "She was hidden." That night, Emery sat at the table, unfolding the letter that had come months before, the one Luther Kane had left behind. It was written in uneven script, its lines barely legible, but its truth was sharp as a blade. Delilah May hadn't just been taken. She'd been bought, sold through a string of men like cattle, forged documents and silent exchanges. A ghost child passed hand to hand until the only thing left of her was bruises and nightmares. When he finished reading, Emery passed the letter to Clara, then stepped out into the cold to let the fury in his chest cool against the wind. That evening, as Ruth swept the porch, May appeared beside her. "Am I still yours?" the girl asked, voice small. Ruth crouched to meet her eyes. "You always were. You always will be." May's lip trembled. "Even if I belong to someone else by blood?" Ruth gathered her close. "Blood doesn't raise you. Blood doesn't sit up with you through the dark, or kiss your bruises, or teach you how to laugh again. You are mine, and you are hers, and you belong to no one who ever tried to own you." That night, Ruth dreamt of chains snapping. Not metal ones, but the kind made of shame and silence. But peace was never left long undisturbed. The next morning, a writer came with word from the border county jail. A prisoner had died. Luther Kane. The cause? Infection. Or maybe a debt paid in blood. He'd never made it to trial. But before he died, he gave something to a guard. A letter. Sealed. Addressed to whoever finds her. Inside were names, places, and one final confession. The man with the white hair wasn't just a buyer. He was Luther's brother, and he was still out there. That night, Ruth sat long by the fire, May asleep on the couch, Clara softly humming an old lullaby nearby. Emery came in from the barn, dusted with snow and silence. "He won't stop," Ruth said. "No," Emery agreed, "but neither will we." They went back through every detail, May's fragmented memories, the places Luther mentioned, the towns the white-haired man had been seen. A pattern emerged, always near orphan homes, always near towns where girls had disappeared, and no one looked twice. "This isn't over," Ruth said. "Not until no one else wakes up screaming in the dark." The next morning, May came down the stairs with her hand in Clara's, eyes wide but steady. "Are you leaving?" she asked. "We'll be back," Ruth promised. "But there's a girl out there like you, and she's still waiting." Emery crouched beside her. "You're the bravest person I've ever met." May didn't smile. but she nodded. The ranger returned that afternoon, as if summoned by wind and whisper. He stood at the edge of the property, horse steaming, face unreadable as always. "You ready?" he asked Emery. Emery nodded once. "She's packed." They left with the wind behind them and snow on their shoulders. Ruth didn't look back, because sometimes healing means going forward, and sometimes justice rides with you, quiet and relentless. As they passed the chapel, birds rustled beneath its eaves. Clara waved from the steps, May bundled in her arms, ribbon tied in her hair. Ruth pressed her palm to her chest. Not every home has four walls. Some homes are forged in fire. They found the next girl 2 weeks later. Her name was Elsie. 8 years old, wild-eyed, half-starved, and silent as dust. She'd been hiding in the loft of a ruined barn, wrapped in a quilt that didn't belong to her. When Ruth reached for her, the child bit her hand, then wept so hard her body trembled. It took hours before Elsie spoke. Even then, it was only a whisper. "He said I was nobody." Ruth cradled her close. "He lied." By then they had a list. Names Luther had written, others added by frightened whispers in town after town. The white-haired man, Benjamin Kane, had woven a trail of scars and missing girls across the counties like a black thread through linen, but now the silence was breaking. The ranger took the lead. He knew how to track ghosts. Emery stayed close, rifle always ready. Ruth kept the fire lit each night, reading to the girls, Elsie, May, and 2 others they'd found since. Soft verses from the Psalms and stories about brave women who had nothing but still stood tall. They moved like a family stitched from fragments, scarred, fragile, whole in a way only survivors can be. Then one night it happened. A letter. No name, just a seal, a serpent biting its own tail, marked in wax. Inside a message. "You've taken what's mine. Now I take it back. The next girl won't be yours to save." There was no signature, but Ruth knew. Benjamin was coming. They returned to the ranch under cover of storm clouds. The town met them at the border. Sheriff Tannen, Clara, the preacher, even Emmy with his awkward smile and a rifle too big for him. "We're not just defending a place," Tannen said. "We're defending what's left of our soul." They fortified the ranch, laid traps, posted watches. Every man and woman willing to stand took a shift. Ruth stood beside them, not because she was strong, but because she refused to be afraid anymore. The wind howled the night Benjamin came. He didn't sneak. He didn't need to. He walked up the drive like it was his land, coat billowing behind him, boots polished, white hair gleaming beneath the stormlight. Behind him 2 men, hired but unsure, paid but not loyal. He called out once, "Bring me the girl." Ruth stepped forward, rifle in hand. "You mean May?" He laughed. "No, that's not her name." "Yes, it is," Ruth said, "because she chose it, because it's hers." Benjamin's voice turned cold. "You don't know what she is." "She's not yours," Emery said, stepping beside Ruth. "You're just a man," the ranger added, stepping out from the shadows behind them. "And you're outnumbered." Benjamin's eyes flicked between them, then up to the hill. The townsfolk lined the ridge, rifles, lanterns, resolve. For the first time, Benjamin Kane hesitated. Then May stepped onto the porch. She wore her blue ribbon, her chin high, her eyes older than 10 years should ever be. "You locked me in the dark," she said, "but I remember now. I remember the woman who sang to me, the one who tried to hide me. You hurt her too, didn't you?" Benjamin's jaw tensed. "You don't scare me anymore," she said. The wind howled again, and with it, a sound like the land exhaling. Benjamin stepped back. "You'll regret this," he said. "No," Ruth replied. "We'll remember it." He turned. His men didn't follow. Not one shot was fired, because sometimes victory is the moment no one has to bleed. Spring came slow that year, like a blessing whispered. Birds returned to the rafters. The girls planted corn beside the cottonwoods. Clara taught May how to sew. Emery built a new swing beneath the porch. Ruth stood taller now, not because the fear was gone, but because she'd chosen to face it. One morning, May drew a picture. 3 people at a table, 1 dog asleep at their feet, hearts drawn above their heads. "I want to hang it on the wall," she said. "You should," Ruth told her. It's your home. And it was. Not because it was safe, but because it was sacred. Because here, at last, they could breathe. Here, the wind couldn't reach.